Okay, we are starting out and ready to go. Genesis chapter 1. And we'll just read the text and get right into it. And just our hope today is just to, as we go through these chapters, is to just break down the passages. If we get some other cross references, we'll certainly bring them about. But since this is the first chapter in the entire Bible, it sort of speaks to us and it lays a foundation of how we are to understand God and the universe that he's created. Very important insights here. And I think when we break it down by details, you'll see things that oftentimes we kind of skip over and we don't think too much of what's actually happening here. So let's get to this. We're going to start with just verses 1 and 2. And Bob Thomas, would you start us off just with those first two verses?
Yep.
You can see that okay?
No, okay, yep, that's fine. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters.
Okay. All right, we're going to start right there. So this is the introduction to the days of creation. The days of creation are going to begin in verse 3, but this is sort of the prologue to that. And so let's start and get a sense of what are we looking at. The first is the summary verse, which is in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And here's a question for you here. It says, so what did God create? Let's start there. What does he say that he created?
The heavens and the earth.
Okay.
It sounds like the universe.
Yeah, sounds like it. Let's talk a little bit about what that is. Let me put this down a little bit. 12. Okay. So we have the heavens and the earth, which we would call the universe. But here's a question for you: is why is the heavens plural?
I think it's referring to all the planets and the stars and the nebulas, everything that is other than the earth.
And the galaxies.
And the galaxies. But we don't say that we only have the earth, the singular earth. And that contains all sorts of stuff. But the heavens, he says, there seem to be multiple heavens.
But if you're thinking like, they talk about there being, more dimensions in this world that we don't really see. I'm thinking like there's the heavens that like the angels occupy, that there's other things around us that we don't necessarily see that are part of our world.
Yeah, let's talk about this for a second. How many heavens are there? Is a
I
question.
have a friend that believes there's three heavens,
Three.
Yeah,
which
do you know
I
why?
find bizarre.
You know why? Where they get the number 3 from? The 3 heavens?
The Trinity.
No, not actually the Trinity, but Paul makes a reference to where he says, "I was taken up to the 3rd heaven."
Right.
So if we have the 3 heavens, what are the 3 heavens then? Well, what would we say is the first thing that we call the heaven?
The ones we can see.
The atmosphere around us.
Yeah, the atmosphere would be the sky. That is considered the heavens, the birds of the heavens, right? So basically the first heaven is the sky, the home for the birds. What would be the second heaven?
The planets and all that stuff.
Yeah,
Universe.
we would call that what? Outer space, I guess.
Yeah.
The home for the planets. And then the third heaven is,
Where
That's right.
God's throne is.
yep, it's the spiritual dimension that we don't have access to. If you remember, I think I remember there was the Russian cosmonaut who, when he first went out into outer space, I don't know if you heard this, he came back a convinced atheist, said, "See, I went out into heaven, I didn't see God." So
Oh,
clearly there is no God because I went to heaven and didn't see him. And I'm like,
Went
no.
to the wrong one.
Yuri Gagarin.
What was his name?
Yuri Gagarin.
Yes, right. So, but there is a third heaven. So we would say that the first heaven is the sky with a home for the birds. The second heaven is the outer space, the home for the planets, and the third is the spiritual dimension, where God's throne is, and also where the angels, the home for the angels, and the spiritual beings. So we have these things. So when God creates the heavens and the earth, we see he's that the word heavens being plural is he's not just the creator of the physical universe that we see here, although that's going to be the focus of the next 6 days. It reminds us that he creates also the spiritual universe, so to speak, all the angels, the demons, the devil himself, all these beings, and the spiritual, whatever the spiritual things look like. I don't know if they have plants in the spiritual dimension or animals or land or whatever it is out there. All of that is his creation as well. So the heavens,
Where have I heard the seventh heaven?
the seventh heaven. I don't know if that's just because it rhymes or if there is that something from like Dante's?
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. They have the Divine Comedy where Dante goes to all the levels of hell, and then he goes to
Right.
purgatory, and then he goes to heaven. And I don't know if I've never read it, so I can't say. But perhaps there's some of that in there. But in the scriptures, we do have a clear reference to a third heaven, which seems to be the Jewish understanding of the way the heavens are divided for us here. Okay. And then, of course, we have the earth, which contains basically, everything on our planet, right?
Mm.
Okay, there we go. All right, so that was begin. Now it begins with the earth, describing the earth. The focus is on the earth here and everything from the earth's perspective. And what does it say? The original condition of the earth. So how it's almost like God begins by sort of creating just a lump of clay, and now he's going to shape it and form it. But what is the beginning of the earth? How does it begin? He describes it with a few words here. What does he say?
Darkness was over the face of the earth,
Darkness is,
Without form,
without form and
void.
yes, we'll start there. Let me pull this up here. So we have, it's without form. What does that mean, without form?
He hasn't shaped.
No
anything.
shape.
There's no discernible shape to this.
Like you said, a lump of clay.
And it's a lump of clay. It's it's without form. It's shapeless. And void means what?
There's
Empty.
nothing there.
Yeah,
Empty.
it's empty. There's nothing in it, but there is something there. I'm going to see what that is in a second. So it's empty.
No plants, animals, no life on it.
Nothing in it. Nothing of just. It's shapeless. It's this empty, and then it says there is darkness. And it describes over the face of the deep. What does that mean? Darkness over the face of the deep.
I always think of the deep as the ocean, the waters.
Yes, you are correct. The deep is like the ocean waters.
And I was thinking, if the birds that are in the sky is a heaven, then could the waters where the fishes are be a heaven?
or a hell.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, no, we wouldn't say that because they clearly put them. There's going to be a separation of the waters in a minute. One will be to the sky, to the expanse. But here it's really interesting. It's very clear. Can you see that it's all beginning with water here? There's the ocean waters, and it references the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the water. So when we get a picture just in these two verses of the opening scene, it's not nothing, and then there's light. There is something there that is being shaped and separated. Now, that's something we would say God created that something, but there is something here at the beginning, and that is basically it's a dark, empty, watery mass, we might call it. It's just this kind of mass of waters. That's all there is. And there's no light, and it's completely empty. It's just water, a watery mass of some sort. And that's what you've got. That's what we're working with here.
Like canvas and paint.
Yeah, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah, it's kind of like this is the canvas. So we're not saying that watery mass was some kind of an eternal water. No, it's something certainly God would have created. But that's where he begins with. He begins with this watery mass and this chaos. That's going to be important because when we get throughout the scriptures, you're going to see that waters will become a form of judgment where God brings the created earth back into the chaos that he pulled it out of. That the water in the deep is the darkness, and it's representative of the chaos, the mayhem, the evil in the world. We talked about how in Revelation how the beast comes out of the sea, because the sea represents the darkness and the void, the emptiness that is there, which is a perfect picture of sort of the evil of this before God brings light and order to all these things. So much of of that which is evil in the world, we say, is that which is pulling us back into this horrible condition of darkness,
Mhm.
void, without form. And isn't that often how we describe the torment of people? Even Jesus describes hell this way, as the outer darkness, as sort of, and people feel that emptiness. When so many people who are in really an evil place, whether they're under the addiction of drugs or just in an empty lifestyle and just out of control, it's like you could describe them the way the earth is described here. They're without form, they're empty, and there's just darkness, and the whole life is like this storming, raging sea, a watery mass that he begins with here. So that's
could the water be done in two forms, vapor and liquid, and not in solid form, ice, because ice would have form?
Ice would have form. Right now, we're just going to go with what he says here, and it's going to become clear that, he has the waters above and the waters below. When he starts separating them that way, that you get different forms of them. And so we have sort of the waters, the clouds in the heaven, which are the waters above us. But it's a vapor form. But those clouds are holding water. We know that. Every time it rains, we're reminded of that. So, but right now at this point, this is not a scientific explanation of things. It's going to be, and this is really important as we go through it, we believe that he's telling us how things transpired, but the way it's being told to us is much more of a poetic and has more theological insights for us than scientific ones. And I think we can get off track when we try to figure out the exact scientific form, because it's not. You can see the poetry already in it, and how he's going to go through each day is a very poetic form that he's going to use for it. And so I want to, it's interesting to talk about how it all kind of developed from a scientific perspective, but I don't want us to miss the more important points, which lay out the moral order of the universe and how God will save us as he brings us things about. So, all right, so the original condition of the earth was this. We start there. He then mentions the Spirit of God in verse 2. And what is the Spirit of God doing?
Bring over the face of the waters.
Yeah. Hovering over the face of the waters. What do you think that means? Spirit of God hovering over the face of the waters.
He's right above the surface.
Mm-hmm. He's right there. And the Spirit of God is over the whole face. It's not like if I were to hover over the face of the ocean, it's a very small portion of it. But the Spirit of God, who is everywhere, you can see is all over this. And I would stress the point of it being is the sovereignty of God,
Mm.
his control over the chaos. I think is really being stressed here. Yes, this scene is terrifying to us.
Mm.
One of the most terrifying scenes is being lost at sea, or even worse than that, of being there without a boat, just floating in the middle of the waters, water everywhere surrounding you, overwhelming you. It's
Mm.
terrifying thought, because it's so out of our control. There is no control whatsoever. We're completely at the mercy of this, and all is darkness and chaos. But even here, God's Spirit is over it all. Over the chaos, he's controlling it. He has authority over it. And it's also anticipating what is about to happen. So this is those first two things really kind of set it up. You see the chaos of the creation, the formless, void, dark, empty, watery mass. And then you have the Spirit of God right there, all over this, ready to move and ready to begin the work. So that's where we start. So you can almost see it like that lump of clay, and the potter's hands are right there on the clay, ready to start making things happen. And usually the first thing that an artist will do with that lump of clay is begin to chop it up and to separate it, to split it up and to use it, ready to use for what he wants to make next. So let's go through now the days of creation. So any questions about the first two verses here? I want to get that. So, all right. Well, let's take the next. Jack, would you read the next verses 3 through 5?
And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day and the darkness night. And there was evening and there was morning, the first day.
Okay. All right. We're going to start with this. With each day, we want to ask the question, what look at the verbs that go with God. We'll call it the verbs of God. So God's mentioned here, what, 4 times? What are the verbs of God? What does he do? God
Said,
said,
saw,
God saw,
called.
God, up before that,
I missed one.
Separated.
Separated.
separated, and God called.
Called.
Okay. We'll take a look at that here. All right. So we'll start with God. We'll break this down into 4 parts here. God, what did God say? What did he see? What did he separate? And what did he call? Okay.
Mm.
Okay. And you're going to see that, by the way, very similar phrases. They can use a few different words. You can see in verses 6, God said again, and God made, and then God called, and then God said, and then God called, and then God saw, and then God said, and he saw, and you see those verbs come up again and again and again and again. So what's going on here? So what does God say?
Let there be light.
Okay, let there be light. Let there be light. Remember, our first problem here, we know, is darkness is over the face of the deep. You can't see anything.
Mm.
And he begins by calling forth light. So it's kind of like a performer on the stage, lights, camera, actions, calls for light so that we can now see everything. God, it's not as if God needs there to be light to do work, but for his work to be seen, there must be light. So let there be
Mm.
light, and there was light. And we're going to note that with each day, we see that God begins with his word, begins each day with his word. That's how he begins. And so then later on, when we come to John, when Jesus is called the Word, the Son is the Word, already you see the Trinity in the first 3 verses. God the Father, who is creating all, but he is commanding his work through the Holy Spirit, who's hovering over the face of the waters. And he begins with his speaking the word that will do all things. The light is created by the word of God. And then it says that God saw. What did he see?
It was good. The light, and it was good.
Yeah, the light was good. When you see the word, typically when it says that God or someone sees something, it means that it's a judgment. God's making a judgment here. And declaring it good. He's defining something for us here. Later on, you're going to see that Eve sees that the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil was good to eat, and she takes it. The sons of God see that they saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took them. And so they're making a judgment. They're not just seeing something, observing something, but they're actually making a statement on it. So he sees, it's not that God sees the light, but he sees that the light was good. He declares it to be good. So immediately there, we're starting to understand, okay, light is good. Darkness, yeah, not so much. Okay, he never declares the darkness to be good. Okay, God separates now. What does he separate?
The light from the darkness.
Light from darkness. Okay. That's his work, is going to be distinguishing. There's a separation happening in the creation. As he creates this order, there has to be separations. There has to be boundaries and distinctions between the two. And when we don't have that, that's the chaos and the confusion. Up here, it was formless, without form. That's not good. And so there needs to be separation for now there to be form. There needs to be boundaries, and needs to be clear. This is where this begins and this ends. So that separation, that there was darkness, and now he brings light. So he's beginning this work. There's a lot more to do. It's still empty, and it's still a watery mass, but at least there is a little bit more form to it, and there is now light to see it. And so he then calls and says what? Okay,
Costa, could you make that just a little bit bigger, please?
how's that?
Thank you, much better.
Sure. God calls what this time, the first day?
The light day and the darkness night.
The light, he calls day, the darkness, night.
Night.
Okay. And so again, those are going to be some symbols for us. That's why, remember, in the new heavens and the earth, there is no night, is there?
Right.
You
No.
know? So in the beginning, there is no day. It's just darkness for us. Now there is light, night and day, but we're moving to a time when the night will be abolished. There'll be no more night. I don't know if you know that in the Gospel of John, when Judas betrays Jesus, it says something that when he goes off, you remember what it says? You remember what it says? It says after Judas goes off and betrays Jesus, it says, and it was night.
All right.
You know, and you have that phrase. So it means literally, yes, it was night, but John means it like this. This is an evil time now. This is the time of darkness. He calls it night. He separates the day from the night. And there was, note the order of things. How does he order the first day? What comes first?
Oh, and there was night and there was day.
Yeah, evening and then morning on the first day. That's something that we're not used to, because we typically think of a day as, well, that morning first and then evening. So we order our days like that. So it's Friday, today's Friday, we have Friday morning and we're moving into Friday evening, but that's not how they understood the days. We are actually right now in the second part of Friday. Friday will be over when the sun goes down. And then Saturday begins. And then that's why we do that a little bit in our holidays. For example, that's why we celebrate Christmas Eve.
Mm.
Because that Christmas Eve is actually the first part of Christmas evening and then Christmas morning. So it always begins with the evening and then into the morning. And that order of events shows sort of the movement of creation. We're going from evening to morning. We're going from something that is dark or evil or something that is not good to something that is good. So we're going to see that throughout, that if we talk about the knowledge of good and evil, evil doesn't necessarily mean that there's a moral force going on. Certainly that includes it, but evil is evil. It is the chaos, the darkness, the void, the emptiness, things that are not good. Good is something that's a positive. Evil is that darkness, that emptiness, that nothingness that it was pulling us back to. So if you remember the first time that God says something is not good, do you remember that? In Genesis 2?
Yeah,
God
for the man to be alone.
Yeah, God looks at the man alone and says it's not good that the man be alone. He's not made anything, there's no fall, there's no evil of sin in the world, but it is not good, that it is an evil thing that the man should be alone. It's not good. There needs to be a helper for him, someone who can fulfill God's plan. So we're moving from evening to morning, and he sets that pace. So that's day one. So let's talk about that. So day one.
So I have to ask, so at 6 p.m. tonight, does it become Saturday?
When the sun goes down, probably closer to 7 p.m. now,
Yeah.
that would be, in the Jewish understanding of things, that would be the beginning of the Sabbath, would be tonight. The Sabbath day begins on Friday night and goes to Saturday sundown.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's interesting is they would say 6 a.m. is the first hour of the day.
The first hour of the day. Yes.
Yeah.
But I guess they don't, they don't consider the evening as the day. So they have the thing. So that would be the first 6 p.m. would be the first hour of the night, right? That how it would be. So. All right. Well, so just a quick summary of the day one. There is it's a day of separation of light and darkness. That's where we begin.
So this isn't the sun. This is just bringing in light into to separate the darkness. Because the sun
Yeah.
hasn't been created.
The sun has not been created yet.
So it just
Sun
is
has
making
not been
something
created.
visible.
Yes, separation of light and darkness. There is God is light himself,
Right.
but now he brings his own light into the created order now, the physical universe here that we're dealing with. And so he brings it now to bear in the created universe. So in the spiritual dimension, some would say that we don't know when exactly the angels were created. We know that they were. It suggests in some passages that the sons of God shouted for joy when he created the earth. So they were watching this. And so from the spiritual dimension, we have that that spiritual dimension has been created already. And now all eyes are on what he's doing in the physical universe here.
Yeah.
And he brings light so that all can see and rejoice at what he is doing here. And it begins with that great separation between the light and the dark. So that's day one. All right, let's go to day two. Let's see, Teresa, would you read day two for us, 6 to 8? Let me get it nice and big
Sure.
for you. How's that?
Good, thank you. And God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening and there was morning, the second day.
Okay, now let's go back here now. This is day two. Let me pull it down a little bit here. Okay, so day two, we had day one was a separation of light and darkness. Day two is also a day of separation. What is the separation here?
Of the
The
waters.
Yeah, of waters. In this case, above and below. Okay. But what do we call the waters above?
It depends if you're an advocate of the canopy theory.
So the waters above would be
The clouds.
Clouds,
clouds, I guess, yeah. And the waters below would be
the oceans, the seas.
yeah. Yeah, we'll call it the sky and the seas. How about that? Make it nice. and
Understood.
In the story of Noah, when you read the story of Noah, there's water coming from more than one direction.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and there are some who hold to this thing called a canopy theory, where there is a layer of water above the heavens, and that provided part of the water. Take that for it. I just throw that out just because that term is there.
Yeah,
Okay.
they have a whole, that's why it's like the whole science of it is, it's interesting. It's really interesting. I mean, the whole thing of, this, it's clear that something strange is happening in Noah's day where you have people living such long lives and we have archaeological finds of these monstrous beings, these dinosaurs and these beings that just are enormous in size. And some suggest that, well, before the days of Noah, you had that incredibly thick layer of water up there that would have protected against the radiation of the sun and perhaps
Right.
enabled things to live much longer and grow much larger. So
Yeah.
you're like,
You
okay,
might be in paradise with all the plants because
Yeah.
it's like a greenhouse effect.
there is a lot of, it's interesting. I mean, it's science and it's very interesting, but we're not going to go there because we're going to try to, we don't want to miss the main, what it really wants us to get to. So,
Right.
but we can have-
Someone
Yeah.
once told me that reptiles continue to grow throughout their life.
Mhm.
And so if the dinosaurs were living for, hundreds of years back in that time, then they just continued to grow that big.
Yeah, it really is interesting. I mean, there's no doubt that these dinosaurs existed, and you have these. They're not called Brontosaurus anymore. What are they called now? They changed their name, but those enormous ones. Nothing comes close to the size of these beasts that roam the land. And yet there's nothing similar to that at all. So something was different in the climate. Something was strange going on. So this might be, Noah's flood might explain a bit. But again, let's come back to our passage here. So he says, now what does God, once again, we have God said. And what does God say?
Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters.
Okay. What does an expanse mean?
The New King James calls it a firmament,
Mhm.
Oh, that's more clear. What does that mean, Jack?
an expanse.
Something
I
firm
used-
that-
I used
something
to
firm
think
that
it
you
meant-
can stand on.
Go ahead, Ron.
And it,
I have a King James Study Bible, and it says that firmament literally is an expanse.
Yeah.
And that is of waters beneath, of vapors above. Jeremiah 10:12.
So an expanse, what is an expanse?
It's saying that it's waters beneath and vapors above.
Okay,
It
but
is,
that,
it is the separation.
it is the
I know.
separation, right? Okay, it's sort of the space between, is that what we mean? Let there be isn't that what an expanse is? The space between the two things? So you have the waters below,
Yeah,
and then you have the sky above, the waters above, and then in between is this space,
okay.
right? All right, so that would be this, that would be sort of the, he calls it, God
Firmament.
said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, okay? Okay. And then it says God made the expanse and separated the waters. God made and separated the waters. Okay. And then God called, what did he call?
The expanse heaven.
The expanse heaven. That's your first heaven.
mm,
Okay. Great. All right, so now we can see that God is providing, coming back up here. We started with no form whatsoever. Now we have light and separation of light and darkness, and now we start to have form within this watery mass. We see a separation now. We can see some boundaries, some clarity coming in. The picture's coming into focus here. Still empty. It's still a watery mass, but at least that now we have some separation happening, and we're going to see what happens next here. So, and again, there's evening and there's morning now, the second day. All right. Okay. Any questions on that so far? Comments? So everyone getting a good picture of how things are being laid out for us? Let's go to day 3. Rob, would you get day 3 for us, verses 9 and 10?
And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good.
Okay. All right. So we have here day 3. We would say, what is going on in day 3? We could say, how about this? Let's come back to day 2 for a second. We could say it's a separation of sky and seas, but we could also add something to that it is a creation of something which we call heaven, right? He
Hmm.
makes the expanse creation of of heaven, at least the first heaven of the expanse.
mm.
Okay. The next day 3, there is another separation going on here. And that is the separation of what is he separating here?
Land and
Water
sea.
and land.
Land and the sea.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
separation of the waters below, separation of the seas,
Mm,
which is, as you know, the creation of,
Oceans.
what does he create in order to separate the seas?
Land.
Of the dry land,
Sky.
right?
dry land.
Yeah, of the dry land, which he calls
Earth.
Earth. Okay.
I know you don't want to bring science into this, but wasn't the early Earth one landmass that separated into the continents?
Yeah, I think that's correct, and I think the Bible would affirm that. I
Mm,
think that the way that this is described is, it seems to suggest that the land was sort of all together at one point. That's where Noah's flood really is interesting,
Yeah.
of how the things break apart, and it's very clear that well, you put the globe together, it certainly seems like South America fits really nicely into Africa.
Yeah.
It certainly seems like it kind of can fit together. You could see, North America and Europe kind of, you could see how they could fit together too there.
Mm,
So, yeah, that's certainly very possible.
Interesting how the terrain of both, if you go to the north and the south, how the terrain changes just about the same on both sides of it.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting, and they've done all sorts of things of even like under the sea and the way the ridges go. Seems like there was some kind of cataclysmic thing that just separated all things, and something like the Grand Canyon, how that forms all of a sudden. A lot of interesting stuff.
All that's fine so long as you have God at the top of the heap, because you have people who come in all of a sudden with theistic evolution and
Yeah.
it's working on its own and God's just overseeing it and all that garbage.
All done by
Yeah.
God. Yep.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's some
That is.
different views of that. It's very interesting. It's interesting. I have a good friend who is he's a theistic. He believes in theistic evolution. He's a solid Christian guy. He's a wonderful guy. But he, for that reason, he still believes that like evolution could happen. But it's interesting. He's not a scientist. He's not in the sciences. He was more of an English type guy. And so he just kind of trusts the scientists. Whereas meanwhile, me and my other friend, I was a math guy and the other guy was a science guy. And because we know a little bit about how science works, we're like, that's garbage. That's not how it works. And that evolution is, when you look at it from a scientific perspective,
Or
it's
mathematical.
it's a terrible theory. It just doesn't hold water. It doesn't fit the evidence. And it's interesting. There are a lot more scientists out there who are not even Christians at all, who are finally coming out and saying, this is not a good theory. It just doesn't explain anything. But they're devoted to it because it gives them a way to explain how things came about without God. And that's what
Yeah.
they're looking for.
They're looking to deny God is what they're looking for.
Yes, it really shows the darkness of the human heart, doesn't it?
mm.
All right, so we have the day 3, the separation of the seas, the creation of the dry land and the earth. But you can even see here, look, remember in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Yes,
And we see the first heaven he's created in day 2. We see the second, and we see the earth created now in day 3.
Three.
He does call the dry land earth and the seas. It's a good question. Come back to your question, Jack, about could we consider the seas a sort of heaven? I don't know, maybe. I mean, there's certainly an outer space quality to it, isn't it? The way that the seas work. That might be an interesting theory to explore. I don't know what to make of that. Because clearly the earth is a reference to the dry land, isn't it, in this passage?
Mm.
So that's very interesting. All right. Let's go next to God said. What does God say?
It was
God
good.
said it was good.
Good.
Before that, verse 9.
Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place.
Let the waters be gathered into one place. Okay, and I think that goes to your one landmass theory of. So here's a question for you: if half the earth was was land and the other half was water, okay, would the land be an island or the water a lake? That's your
The
question.
land's an island.
All
Try
right,
for a continent.
all right, so God, let the waters be into one place. Let dry land appear. Let dry land appear.
There is more surface water than there is land.
Is that
Yes.
correct? Yes,
But 75%, I think.
yes.
Yeah.
God called, and then it says God called. We talked about that already, the dry land, earth,
Was a, mhm.
and the waters he called
These.
These.
waters he called seas. So there's plural there. That's kind of interesting. gathers them together in one place unless the dry land appears. So now there is a separation of the seas, so to speak. So on one side and the other, I guess they would be, that would now qualify. There's a separation of water, so there's more than one sea as the land separates them. But the main point is that God saw what?
It was good.
That it was good. Now, this is interesting. We saw God separating the light from the darkness, and he saw that the light was good, and he sees that the dry land was good, but he doesn't see anything good in day 2. I don't know if you saw that. That's kind of interesting. There's just nothing that's like new has really happened just yet. He's separated things. He's kind of waiting. But the good things happened on day 1, and another good thing happens on day 3. So let's take day 3 continued now. And then God says, so this is, I should have done is I should take this and put it up here. That makes more sense. This is still part of day 3. Oopsie. Sorry about that. Hold on here.
I have a question. It's a strange question. I'm sorry, but is
Yes.
there any place on this earth where the oceans are absolutely cut off from any other ocean? Or do they just go from one name to another? Do you
They
know what
go
I'm
from
saying?
one to the other. Because there's actually a river that runs through all of the oceans.
Is it really?
Yeah. We look at the Gulf Stream, but that's only one part of the whole river flowing through the whole oceans.
Interesting. So there is a river. Was it like an underwater river that connects them
Yeah,
all?
the current.
All right.
Okay. Oh,
Gulf
that's
Stream.
interesting. Okay. Well, let's continue with day 3. There's a second God said. So there's 2 parts to day 3. So we have the separation of, we'll call this day 3A. How about that?
Mhm.
And then we'll do day 3B. How about that? And what is happening on day 3B? Let's talk about that. Liz, would you read that for us, 11 to 13?
You make it a little bigger.
How about if I do this? Let me, yeah. That good?
Whoa. It
big
certainly is. And God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees, bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the 3rd day.
Okay, great. All right, let's look at this now. So day 3B here, the second part. So the first part of day 3, intentionally, he says it was good twice on day 3. Day 3 is a very important day. So we have the separation of the seas, the creation of the dry land. And the second thing that happens on day 3 is what?
Plant life.
This is the creation of life, of first life, in particular the plants and the trees
Add grass.
and the grass. Is mentioned grass there too? Yeah. The seed and the fruit and so forth, and vegetation. All the things that it's life itself, and then all the things that will sustain life created there. So, so we come back now to this basically God. So God said, let the earth, that's the dry land, sprout vegetation. And we'll call it vegetation and fruit. to be eaten. And he has a phrase there that he uses. He's going to use again and again in this. Verse 11. Each,
So,
After its own kind.
yeah, according to its kind. What does that mean? According to its kind.
There's different kinds.
I mean, it really.
It means you mix two horses and you don't get a zebra.
Yeah, there's no horses just yet, but in this case, we do. There's all sorts of different vegetation. There's apples, there's
And
oranges,
oranges.
pears, there's bananas, there's flowers of all sorts.
Separation.
Those figs in
Nice.
there.
Yes, this is a stresses the order of creation and the diversity of it too. But that order, remember, and also this is the first filling that we're seeing now
Mm.
on day 3. It's Earth is no longer empty. So we've removed at this point, coming back to the evil that we began with, without form, we've been seeing the form coming up, the separation of the waters, the land coming, form is developing. We're seeing things coming into focus now. The void has been taken away. It's no longer empty. There is now life here. The land has emerged, and on that land is being filled now with vegetation, with fruits and trees. The darkness has been taken away. And so this is a great day, the third day.
He said
Because
it
we
twice.
really see, what's that?
I said, he said it twice. He said it was good.
Yeah, and that's why he says twice, right? Exactly right. So the first filling, and then it says God saw that it was good. Once again. It was good. That's the second time.
Hmm.
And then there's evening and there's morning, the third day. Keep that third day in mind. The third day, when things happen on the third day, from the very beginning of creation, the third day is a very important, very special day. It is the day that you see of life. It is the day of double goodness, of resurrection, so to speak. It is the day when fruit comes forward. That's why in our creed, we don't just say, we say that strange phrase of that he was crucified, dead, and buried. On the third day, he rose from the dead. We don't just say he rose from the dead, but we say on the third day, he rose from the dead. And so we're going to keep that in mind, because in Genesis and throughout the Bible, things are going to happen on the third day, which brings us back to this moment of like, all was sort of like still chaotic. And then suddenly the third day happens and wonderful things happen. And there's a creation of new life and order. And in one sense, you could look at the days of creation as 2 sets of 3 days. On the first third day, we have the creation of life. On the second third day, we're going to see the creation of man and God's image, the crowning achievement of this. So we're going to see that again and again. All right. Let's see. Any questions about the first 3 days so far? How are we doing on that? Okay. Shall we take, let's go one more day and we'll call it a day. How about that? We'll go to the next passage, 14 to 19. Claudette, would you get day 4 for us? She there?
She's taking care of her mom, so she might have
Okay.
gotten called away.
All right. Let's see. Oh, she's on mute.
Back.
Can't
You there?
hear you.
I'm here. And
Okay.
God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night. And let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made the 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day.
Thank you. All right, so day 4 now. Let's take a look at this day. What are we, how would you summarize what day 4 is? What's going on?
Sun and the moon.
Okay. Yeah, so this is the creation of, we'll call it the lights, I guess, right?
Yeah, I would say the stars, yeah.
Sun, the moon, the stars, right?
There's,
Creation of the heavenly lights. How about that?
mm,
Sun, moon, and stars. All right. And so let's go through that day together here. So the first, so God said, let there be lights. That's interesting, isn't it? That sounds like day 1, doesn't it?
Mhm.
You'll notice that there's a parallel in these passages here. You're going to see, I think we talked about it last time, where day 1, we're coming back. We finished that first cycle of 3. Day 1, light and darkness, separates the light and the darkness. Day 2, he separates the waters above from the waters below. Day 3, he separates the land and the seas. And now we have day 4, and we're coming back to day 1. So day 1, he's now going to, when he created light, he's now going to fulfill on that promise and expand that light, and give us heavenly bodies that will bring us light. So let there be lights.
But this is different because it says lights in the expanse of the heavens.
Yeah.
Before it was just light.
In the expanse of the heavens. So this is now the expanse of the heavens. We had the first expanse, which is the sky, right? Or that he called heaven. Now we have the heavens, which is the beyond the sky, where you've got the outer space area here. So he's going to fill now that with these, and they're going to, what's their job? He gives
Separate day and night.
So he's going to separate day and night. So first it's going to separate day from night. So, and that's true. How do you know when it's day and how do you know when it's night? Well, what's in the sky during the daytime?
The sun.
the sun.
And
The
what's in the
greater of the
sky at
lights.
night?
And sometimes the moon during the day.
Times, but the moon and the stars dominate the night, and the sun dominates the day, and that's how you know. I mean, you have all those children's books, and it's very easy to depict day and night to our kids from the little children's books we make. Just put a little shiny, smiley sun in there, and you know it's daytime. You put the little crescent and a star, and you know it's nighttime. And he separates the day from the night. But he gives another reason for it as well. What does he say?
Signs and seasons.
Yes. So now it's going to be for signs and for seasons. For days
Now we're getting back to science again.
and years.
Years.
Okay. All right. What
So
does
he's
that mean
developing
for
time.
signs and for seasons?
He's developing time.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
knew like this different events that were coming based on the moons.
Yeah.
You know,
He
like if
is-
it was a farmer's moon or a certain, they gave the moons, the different months a name. And that's when they knew it was harvest time or springtime.
Absolutely right. So you have, for example, I mean, the sun really defines each day as it rises and sets. The moon sort of defines the months.
It was
The
huge for
lunar month.
Jews. Huge,
What's that?
huge for, says it
Yeah.
was huge for Jews when they, the start of their holy days and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And the stars are actually, they define the seasons. I don't know if you've ever studied astrology at all, astronomy, I should say, not astrology. Hope you have known
Well,
that.
even astrology though, even astrology is all based on the
Yeah.
movement of the stars.
Yeah, they define the seasons. And so you can tell what season it is at night by where the constellations are at certain times of night. So for example, I know it's, in the wintertime, you see the great constellation Orion with his belt and his bow and arrow, and you can see that very clearly, brilliantly. But that's a winter constellation. You don't typically see, you have to wait late into the night if you're going to see it in the summertime. But in the wintertime, you can see it early in the evening. And so you can tell what season it is by whatever constellations are coming. There's only one star that never moves. You know which one that is?
The
No,
North-
The North Star?
It's the North Star. That's right.
Mm.
All the other stars move around it, and they come for seasons and signs. And so it's really very interesting how everything is these heavenly bodies. He's using them again to separate and to bring order. So he orders the time for us. So there's a real clear understanding of when a day begins and when it ends, and when a year begins and ends, and when a season begins and ends, and when the months begin and end. There's a very clear, he's given us heavenly bodies to order time for us, which is really remarkable when you ponder that, of how God orders things, that he's moving, adding more and more order to this. It was formless and void, darkness.
Chaos.
If he doesn't do this, and life becomes one endless day, it's like what happens with these folks who are put in solitary confinement for months on end, and they're not allowed out, and they don't know what day it is, they don't know whether it's dark or night out, and it's torture for them as one day flows into the next. There's no sense of beginning or ending. It's terrifying for people. But isn't it a nice thing? Isn't it a great thing to know that every day has an end to it? Because how many times have you had a miserable day? And to know that tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah.
I can go to sleep tonight and I can start new tomorrow. What a mercy of God that he gives us days and seasons to start anew, and even new years. And how many times have you been brought out of a despairing moment simply because it's a new day or a new season?
His passions begin anew every morning.
Yeah. It is he's so gracious and kind. You can see how intentional he is in all of this creation, how he orders things for us. So that's the two greater lights he makes. So God said that, and then where do we leave off here?
So
He
the
then-
interesting thing about that is that in the new heaven, there is no night, correct?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because there is no darkness, there's no evil.
And the sun is the light.
Every
Yeah,
day
and-
is going to be wonderful, and you won't
Yeah.
be wishing for it to be over.
Exactly right. We won't need that delineation of time like we do now. We need this because we're mortals. We're sinful. We suffer, and the seasons and times are really important for us because we need constant renewal, because we just go astray.
And I think of in the very northern part, like certain sections of Iceland and Alaska, where it's daylight for 6 months of the year, and then it's nighttime for 6 months of the year. I can't even, because we're so accustomed to it changing every
Oh, it's
24
torture.
hours.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
And
It's torture.
And years ago, when Aaron and I went to visit missionaries in West Africa, we were just 13 degrees north of the equator. And it's interesting, we never thought of it, but we looked at the horizon. The horizon was a lot lower than it is here because we're so close to the equator. We
Mm.
just thought that was an interesting point.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I mean, we can feel it now. I mean, just of how it seems like the further you go from the equator, the more miserable you are.
Yeah.
As, when you're in Florida, it's just like great. It's sunny. The colors are bright and brilliant. And here, just everything's gray. You know.
Although they had taken us out for a cookout, and the missionaries we were with turned the Jeep in the direction so we know how to get home, because once they turned the lights out, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. It was totally black. I thought, wow,
That's interesting. That's really
yeah.
interesting.
I wonder if we need rest, if we need to sleep in heaven, because on the seventh day it said God rested. So do you
God
think we need
rested.
sleep?
But God didn't sleep.
Yeah.
God resting doesn't mean he slept, because it says that God does not sleep.
Right, he just changes his activities.
Yeah, so he rested in the sense he completed his work of creation. But
Mm.
Jesus says of the Father, my Father's always working.
Right,
But the work of creation would be complete. And then he would enjoy it, but then he would also begin his work of redemption, his work of sustaining things. So he is always working, but it's a different kind of work. But let's talk about this, come back to 16. So God said that, and then God made the two great lights,
Mhm.
the greater light, which is,
Son,
The day,
Done. The day.
yes, the greater light is the sun. The lesser light is the moon,
The moon.
and they rule. And so even there is an order, there's a hierarchy of this, of
Mm.
the rulers. So there's some suggestions possibly that there is these, remember the stars, what they represented in the book of Revelation?
Angels.
The angels, right? That the spiritual beings are represented by the stars and the heavenly bodies. So it seems like perhaps there is a level of order in the spiritual dimension too, where God gives authority to some of his heavenly host to have authority over others. And so in the heavenly bodies, you see the sun having authority over the day, the moon having authority, having been given dominion over these things. So we see it in a physical way. And this, I think there's good reason to suspect that in that physical way, we're getting a glimpse of a little bit of how the spiritual world is set up as well. But in any case, God then does what? He sets them in the expanse to give light. Okay.
Mm.
All right. To give light and to rule over day and night, and to separate the light from darkness. So you can see those phrases coming into play now. He sets them there, they give light, they rule, and they continue to separate, rule and separate, order. He's providing order here. Separation, ruling, giving them dominion, and also the filling of everything. He fills that expanse with the stars. By the way, you know how many stars there are over there?
I didn't hear you. What?
How many stars there are in our universe?
Oh, goodness. Can't even count them.
So apparently there are, like, the stars that we see are just part of our galaxy, the Milky Way.
Mm.
All the stars that we see are part of our galaxy, and they suspect there's like a couple 100 billion of those stars in our galaxy. And then they suspect that they estimate there's at least a couple 100 billion galaxies out there.
Wow.
did
Their
you
own
see that section where they took one of the telescope, the Hubble, and they pointed it at a dark space where there was nothing there, and they left it there for a long time and found out that there were just thousands and thousands of galaxies in that one little space that they couldn't see anything.
Wow.
Awesome. It's stunning.
Mm.
And
There are as many stars as the descendants of Abraham.
Yeah.
he talks about that as many as the stars and the sand of the sea. Like there's this billions of numbers, so to speak. Which also, I think that's a great point, Jack. It shows that God's promise to Abraham was not just his blood family. There's no way that the blood relatives of Abraham can match that number.
No.
But those who have faith over the history of the world get into the billions now, doesn't it? So it's great. Let's just finish up real quick. God once again saw that it was good.
Mm.
Okay, one more time. All right, so that's it. Evening in the fourth day, and we'll leave it off there.
So I looked up the word expanse in my concordance. I was just curious to see what the definition would be. And basically all it says is an extended surface.
An extended surface.
When you think about the heavens, and as I'm reading now, as I'm thinking about that explanation, and I'm looking at this section we just did on the fourth day, the expanse, it just basically is just a big area. Heavens, it's a very big surface.
Great.
Mm.
All right. Well, we'll finish up the Days of Creation next week. I'm going to stop recording here.